It's time to kick ass and chew bubble gum. And I'm all out of gum.
Hello my dear paint elementals, MrJohn here, and today we're gonna review another Build Engine game, and that game is Shadow Warrior, one of the members of the Build Engine trio or quartet if you count Iron Fury as well. Released in 1997, developed by the wonderful team known as 3D Realms, whose surprise surprise, they also made Duke Nukem 3D, which was also powered by the Build Engine, and it was an awesome game. It was published by GT Interactive, who also published Duke Nukem 3D, Blood, Quake, and Doom as well. Now, of all the Build Engine games that I've played in my life, Shadow Warrior was the only Build Engine game that I haven't played yet when I was a young kid, as I only played Duke Nukem 3D and Blood and then recently Iron Fury. However, once I got the classic Redux version of the game, running it using a source port such as Raze, I really started loving the game for its fast-paced gameplay and its kick-ass music, and I really regretted not playing it much earlier when I was a young kid. So anyways, let's get our Wangs ready and let's see why Shadow Warrior is one hell of a banger. So let's find out. So the story of Shadow Warrior goes like this. Wang is a bodyguard for Zilla Enterprises, which is a powerful conglomerate that controls every industry in Japan. Even though he is aware of the crimes that has resulted from the domination of Zilla Enterprises, he was too content with his position to challenge his employers. However, everything changed when Master Zilla, who is the owner of Zilla Enterprises, embarks on a malicious plan to, you guessed it, taking over Japan.
Of course!
Using creatures from the dark side, when Wang discovers this, he's had enough of Zilla's malicious intentions and quits his job. As soon as Zilla realizes the threat that Wang possesses, he orders the monsters to kill him, and Wang must stop Zilla at all costs. So how's the gameplay? Well, if you have played any old school FPS shooter, you probably know where this is going. You kill enemies, pick up weapons and keys to proceed around the levels, you know, the usual god stuff that you do in old school FPS games. But is the gameplay of Shadow Warrior better than, say, Duke Nukem 3D? Well, the answer is yeah. Shadow Warrior's gameplay feels more polished and advanced than in Duke Nukem 3D. Not to say that Duke Nukem 3D gameplay was bad, it's actually pretty good even to this day. I just think Shadow Warrior has more improvements that Duke Nukem 3D wish it had, most notably the level design and the weapons themselves as well. So let's talk about the weapon roster. Every FPS game released in the 90s had 5 stereotypical weapons that you find in every game, from a pistol to a rocket launcher. While Shadow Warrior is one of those games, its weapon roster was pretty unique for the time when the game was released in 1997. First off, let's start with the shurikens, which they are pretty similar to Duke Nukem 3D's pistol. The shurikens are thrown in volleys of 3, and they are pretty decent at dispatching low tier enemies without wasting Uzi's ammo, which makes the shurikens pretty useful in their own right. Then you have the riot gun, which is a pretty powerful weapon and it's pretty satisfying to use. The weapon has 2 firing modes, semi-auto mode and full auto mode, and these modes are pretty useful in different situations. For instance, the semi-auto mode can conserve the ammo much better as well, dispatching low tier enemies, whereas the full auto mode is excellent against mid to high tier enemies like the Guardians and Rippers. Although I do think using the riot gun against the Rippers is pretty pointless, given you can kill them easily using your sword or your fists. But I'll get to those weapons later. Anyways, keep in mind that like every shotgun in every game, if you are very far from the enemy, the weapon will be less effective, so be careful. Next up we have the Uzis, which they are one of the most important weapons in the game, as you will use them for like 95% of the game's campaign. The Uzis are pretty powerful, especially when you wield 2 Uzis at the same time, which at the time it was cool wielding 2 weapons at the same time. It made you feel like a motherfucking badass. The rocket launcher is another great weapon to use as it's pretty powerful against everything, but what makes this weapon pretty unique is that it has 2 alternative firing modes. Firstly, we have the Heat Seeker mode, which will make the next 5 missiles automatically target enemies if you obtain a Heat Seeker card. And then we have the Nuclear Warhead, which is one of the most devastating weapons in the game, as it does immense damage to everything caught in its blast radius, including Lo Wang. So you must take cover, otherwise you'll turn into a nuclear grilled meat, and that will be your fault for not taking cover.
Stand by. 3, 2, 1. All systems ready. Warning.
Oh, look! You're coming apart!
That's a lot of damage!
Up next, we have the Grenade Launcher, another excellent weapon to use, as you can wipe out an entire room of enemies from a distance. Not to mention that the grenades you fire can bounce, which can be very useful to dispatch enemies from places that you cannot reach. Now, the weapon has a very large radius area of damage, so you have to be very careful not to use grenades on close range fights, as it does a lot of damage to the player. Now, speaking of splash damage, I remember watching G-Man Liv's review of Shadow Warrior, and he said that the grenade launcher was a liability because the splash damage is absurd.
The grenade launcher's another explosive weapons, but this thing is an outright liability. The reason I say that is because the splash damage range for this thing kinda feels like it's almost too far, meaning you're gonna take splash damage from the explosions when you'd think you'd be out of range. As a result, it's a weapon that I just never really used all that much, and like the after effects of eating Taco Bell, when put into an enclosed space, the results can be deadly.
Wrong, 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 wrong. Wrong, 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 wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong. You're wrong.
Which I myself disagree, since it's not a liability, very far from it. Sure, its splash damage is absurd if you are facing enemies at close range, but it's actually very useful at long range, which was meant to be used. But then again, it's the same person that said that Fresh Supply was pretty good despite the product being pretty buggy and not accurate to the original Blood when it was initially released. So I believe that his statements about the grenade launcher are totally bullshit. Sticky bombs, one of Lo Wang's sneakiest weapons, are bombs that stick to enemies, and once they are attached to the enemy, it will explode after 3 seconds. The bombs are pretty useful for dispatching coolies as well as opening secret areas, which are vital to your success in the game. Then you have the railgun. Shadow Warrior was one of the first FPS games to feature a railgun, which was amazing to see and use it at the time when this game was released, and the weapon itself ain't half bad. It can jib a low tier enemy like the evil ninjas as well as the coolie ghosts. Now granted, its ammo capacity is pretty low, but its power is damn high, as its shots can go through multiple enemies at once.
It is natural to die.
The Guardian Head is a unique weapon in this game. It's literally a Guardian Head that you can use as a weapon, which blew me away when I first played this game. Using an enemy's head as a weapon? Yes, please! Now, the weapon has 3 firing modes. The first one uses 1 charge per shot, but at a fast rate. The second mode creates a circle of fireballs around Lo Wang, and any enemy that touches the fireballs dies. And then the third mode consists of shooting 3 fireballs that cause explosions along the ground until the fireballs hit something. Now, the head has a great high fire rate at the cost of its limited ammunition, and it's best to use it for wiping out big groups of enemies or when fighting bosses. Then we have the Heart, which is like, imagine Duke Nukem's 3D Holoduke, but instead of being useless in the single player campaign, it's actually really useful, especially on the harder levels in the game. It summons a clone of Wang, which wanders around the area and kills any enemy with a railgun. Lo Wang can hold up to 5 hearts at one time, so you must use them wisely. And how do you get the hearts? Well, by slaying Rippers, of course. And last but not least, we have the melee weapons. Wang's Fist of Doom, and his katana. Now, in old school FPS games, melee weapons tend to be pretty useless and downright bad. However, in Shadow Warrior, this is actually not the case, as the melee weapons are honestly pretty good. The katana is excellent against low tier enemies, such as the low tier evil ninjas, rippers, as well as the coolie ghosts. It's pretty cool to use the katana as it slices the low tier enemies into sushi, which is pretty damn cool to see an enemy getting sliced off instead of dying in a normal way. The Fists of Fury are also useful against low tier enemies, especially the rippers. Both the fists and the sword are excellent weapons to conserve ammo for other weapons, and not using them means that you're gonna get fucked in the ass in the higher difficulties. And trust me, using your fists against the rippers makes you feel like a motherfucking badass, especially when you jib rippers with your own hands. That is so fucking fantastic. Overall, I really like the weapons in Shadow Warrior. They were pretty unique at the time and also pretty powerful. But so were the enemies, so let's talk about it. The enemies in Shadow Warrior are pretty brutal, but even so, they are pretty easy to deal with if you know what you're doing. You have the evil ninjas, which are the most common enemies you face in the game. All of them wield a Uzi. However, the evil ninjas come in 5 different variations. The brown ones are the easiest to kill. Using your sword can kill them in an instant, and they throw shurikens at Lo Wang. The red ones are stronger than the brown ones, as they shoot rockets at Lo Wang instead of shurikens, which makes them very dangerous. The orange ones have the ability to shoot heat-seeking rockets, and they are pretty dangerous to deal with, especially in open areas. Then you have the grey ones, which they fire grenades at you, and they are pretty terrible to deal with, since the splash damage from the grenades is pretty big. So if you encounter the grey evil ninjas, and if they fire a grenade, run as fast as you can and take cover. However, if you thought that the grey ones were the most dangerous, you haven't seen anything yet. The shadow ones are the most terrifying enemies in the game, as they stay nearly invisible, making it nigh impossible to shoot at them, since they blend in dark surroundings. Not only that, they can blast Lo Wang with their magic napalm, which will always one-hit you. Luckily for me, I've played this game so many times that I can dodge their attacks with ease, so you have to be careful and not to overextend. A missile or a grenade is more than enough to dispatch them. One thing that I liked about the evil ninjas is that sometimes if they fail to kill Lo Wang, they can commit seppuku, which was really interesting to see an enemy doing that at the time. The coolies are what would happen if 3D Realms was like, you know what, remember the sentry drones for Duke Nukem 3D, what if we put them in Shadow Warrior but make it more Japanese and also make it more dangerous, and on top of that have a ghost spawn after they explode, making them more annoying than ever. These are the coolies in a nutshell. Now granted, once you get the rocket launcher or the grenade launcher, you can jib them with ease, so they can't spawn the ghosts. Now, if you don't jib them, they have a 50% chance to spawn the ghost, which once it's spawned, they shoot red orbs at you, which they deal big damage to the player. They can be easily killed with a railgun or with a katana when they phase into existence. Then you have the rippers, which they can leap at Lo Wang from long distances. Sometimes they can cling to walls as well as charging at Lo Wang with full speed. You can deal with them by either using the katana or your fists, as using other weapons is pretty pointless, so if you encounter the rippers, just use the katana or the fists, and also never stop moving. It's also worth mentioning that there is also a bigger version of the ripper, which is a much stronger version than the original ones. The baby rippers are a much smaller versions of the rippers. They move faster and they also shoot green goo at you. However, despite being faster, they are also very fragile when killing them with the katana, and just like with the rippers, the baby rippers also have a giant version of themselves. The Guardians shoot fireballs that deal a lot of damage, but at close range, they all hit Lo Wang with their sword, that can cut him into pieces. Luckily, if you kill them, they have a chance to drop their head, which can be used as a weapon. The female warriors are similar to the evil ninjas, however they are much more dangerous than the evil ninjas. For starters, they carry a crossbow and they can shoot bolts at high speed, although the bolts can be dodged if you know what you're doing. However, what makes these warriors very dangerous is the fact they can throw sticky bombs at Lo Wang, so you must never stop moving, otherwise you will bite the dust if you get caught with a sticky bomb. Trust me, it's bad. And last but not least, we have the Hornets.
Oh, no, not the beast! Not the beast! Ah! Open my eyes! Eyes! Ah! Ah!
Which are the most annoying enemies in the game. Not only they are pretty hard to hit them, given that they move pretty fast, but when there's a swarm of them, they drain your health quickly. Because of their movement, they are really hard to kill them. The best you can do is luring them into tight corridors, so it's much easier to hit them. However, on paper it's good, but on practice it's terrible, because of their speed. My only way to deal with them is just run over them and never waste ammo on the bees. Luckily, the Source Port Build GDX has an option to turn bees on and off, and I always turn it off because they're pretty annoying. Or you can use rays and kill the bees with auto aim, which for me is always the best way to send these pricks to bee hell. Now, like in Duke Nukem 3D and Blood, Shadow Warrior does have bosses as well, such as the Serpent God, who can shoot energy bolts and spawns accursed heads as well that will explode upon contact. Then we have the Sumo Man, whose mask will cause damage as he stomps on the ground, and he can clap, which deals heavy damage to the player. He can also leave small pockets of green gas, which can cause damage to Lo Wang over time. Not to mention that he can also shoot fireballs in all directions. Lastly, we have Zilla, which, if I'm being honest, he's a total joke, as you could dodge his attacks with ease if you circle strafe around him. He can be easily taken down by using the rocket launcher or the railgun. You can also punch him to death, but be careful that he can explode after you beat him, so finish him off from a distance using your weapons. Now, with that said, is the game hard? Well, of course it is. It's a build engine game, so what did you expect? When it comes to difficulty, Shadow Warrior is a hard game, but not as hard as Blood. It's similar to Iron Fury when it comes to its difficulty. Like in Duke Nukem 3D, Shadow Warrior has 4 levels of difficulty. The Tiny Grasshopper being the easiest skill, whereas the No Pain No Gain is the hardest skill. Unlike in Blood, where the health points of every enemy in the game scales up with the difficulty, Shadow Warrior only adds more enemies if you play on the harder skills, similar to Iron Fury. Me personally, I didn't think that the game was that hard, as people made it out to be. I mean, I still think Blood is the hardest of all the Build Engine games that I've played. I always played the game on No Pain No Gain, and it was hard, but so satisfying once you get the hang of it. As I said before in my Blood review, both Blood and Shadow Warrior are games that aren't meant for you going open fire against enemies with low risk, high reward style. These games are meant for you to play safe and using every weapon you have, memorizing the enemy placements, and also save often. Like I said before, the high tier evil ninjas like the red, orange, grey, and the shadow ones are pretty dangerous, especially on the higher difficulty skills, so you must play carefully against them. If you die to them and you blame them for their shenanigans, it's mostly, definitely your fault. At the end of the day, it comes all down to knowledge and skill and master the mechanics of the weapons. So what I'm trying to say is, if you want to be the very best ninja, like no one ever was, you must get good at this game. Not to mention that the game rewards you big time when you explore every nook and cranny of every level in the game. And speaking of secrets, they are pretty rewarding to find, since Lo Wang says this.
Ancient Chinese secret.
It's so damn satisfying. Don't you just love when a game rewards you like this? The game also has inventory items, like medikits, night vision goggles, gas bombs, caltrops, flash bombs, and my personal favorite being the smoke bomb. Oh boy, this item is so damn broken. It says that it gives you a partial invisibility, but it's such a goddamn understatement. First off, it says you stay partially invisible for a few seconds. which is bullshit because you stay partially invisible for like 25 seconds, which is pretty long. Secondly, the enemies, 90% of the time you stay invisible, they get scared and they barely try to attack you. Third, when you use the gas bomb, your punches feel more powerful, which makes dispatching enemies much easier. I cannot overstate how much I love the smoke bomb, and it's so damn useful in situations such as this.
I am the Shadow Warrior. How did that for kung fu fighting you chicken shit? Eat this, pencil dick. It is good day to die.
Just like in Duke Nukem 3D, the game has a lot of interactions and references. For instance, in the first level of the game, Seppuku Station, you interact with Pachinko machines, play with RC cars, and there's even a Speed Racer reference, which is pretty nice. Hell, there's even a Sailor Moon reference in one of the last levels of the game. Also, just like in Duke Nukem 3D, there's also ladies to interact. However, unlike in Duke Nukem 3D, where they show their goodies, here is completely the opposite.
Ancient Chinese secret. Hello, what died up here?
You jerk.
Well, if you want to say it like that, I mean, I guess that is how it's gonna be.
Shadow Warrior is one of the first FPS games to feature vehicle combat, like riding tanks and turrets. Now sure, nowadays using the tanks in the game are clunky as fuck, but not bad by any means, and they are still fun to use, making the game pretty ambitious for the time when it was released. The levels in Shadow Warrior were, and still to this day, pretty damn good. Dare I say that they're even better than Duke Nukem 3D's levels. It's as if 3D Realms took what they've learned from Duke Nukem 3D's level design and took it to the next level improvement, pushing the build engine to its absolute limits. The lighting, the atmosphere, you name it, they hit the right spot of awesomeness, and each level never feels the same as one another, and they were pretty challenging and packed a lot of adrenaline. The levels themselves have a lot of variety. There's levels that take place in spooky temples, cities, caves, and even inside of a submarine. Now that's some good variety. For me, I liked every level from the game, and the levels were designed by Gracie Bastard, Stephen Colt, Keith Schuler, Eric Reuter, Jim Norwood, and George Brassard. Like every Build Engine game, Shadow Warrior also had expansion packs, such as the Twin Dragon made by Wild Productions and Level Infinity and released on July 4th, 1998, and Wanton Destruction, which was made by Sunstorm Interactive, who also worked on several expansions from Duke Nukem 3D, Blood, and even Redneck Rampage? Redneck Rampage review when, Mr. John? Not anytime soon, my friend. Wanton Destruction was tested by 3D Realms, but sadly it was never released by the distributor until September 9th, 2005, where the expansion pack was released for free as Anthony Campbell, the former president of Sunstorm Interactive, notified 3D Realms by email that he found the expansion pack and therefore released the add-on for free of charge. Talk about nice move. The premise of Twin Dragon goes like this. Wang finds out that he has a twin brother named Hung Lo, and he becomes a dark person whose plans are, you guessed it, take over the world.
Of course!
And Wang must stop him at any costs. In Wanton Destruction, after defeating Zilla, Wang visits his relatives in the USA, but he finds out that Zilla is at it again, and Wang must defeat Zilla for the last time. Me personally, I liked the Wanton Destruction more than Twin Dragon. Not to say that Twin Dragon was bad, it's just that Wanton Destruction's levels had more quality than Twin Dragon's levels. And since these levels were created by Sunstorm Interactive themselves, you can expect that at least they put a lot of effort into their levels. Twin Dragon, on the other hand, was not bad, but not great either. Just okay. It has its moments, but for the most part, the levels themselves look generic, and granted, the add-on was free of charge, but still, I expected more, you know. There was also a third add-on for the game named Deadly Kiss, But unfortunately, the expansion was never released, although there were some screenshots of the expansion. Also, it was developed by Simply Silly Software, who made Duke Nuclear Winter and Duke Zone 2. When it comes to source ports, there are lots of Shadow Warrior source ports to choose from, like Raze, Void SW, Classic Redux, and Build GDX. I would not recommend Classic Redux because it's buggy as heck and it hasn't been updated in years. For instance, the game crashes sometimes when trying to quick save and quick load, as well as the janky camera movement. Me personally, I use both Build GDX and Raze, since the former one has an option to turn off the Hornets, which is pretty cool if you ask me, since they are pretty annoying. But other than that, the other source ports are pretty good as well, so you can use whichever one you want and it's a matter of preference. Just don't use Classic Redux, it's janky as fuck. As for graphics, for a Build Engine game, Shadow Warrior looks absolutely awesome even to this day. 3 Realms knew what they were doing. They pushed the engine to its limits by implementing true rooms over rooms in some maps, the introduction of voxels for sprites, as well as transparent water that Duke Nukem 3D wished it had. All of these improvements puts Duke Nukem 3D to shame at the time when Shadow Warrior was released in 1997. Now, make no mistake, Duke Nukem 3D's graphics are still amazing, and that's not to say that it looks bad, it's just Shadow Warrior's new graphical features puts Duke 3D's graphics to shame. Now, sure, Quake was released 1 year ago, and its graphics were pretty impressive, but does Quake has the level of quality that Shadow Warrior, Duke Nukem 3D, and Blood had? I don't think so. It seems that 3 Realms, rather than jumping the bandwagon of the Quake engine, they decided to push the Build engine to its limits, resulting in levels that have amazing quality that Quake wished it had. But then again, if Quake had the levels that Shadow Warrior had, it would turn PCs from that era into nuclear bombs that would detonate in a second. The game also has a lot of attention to detail. For instance, when you slay enemies with your katana or with your fists, both of these weapons have bloodstains and you can wash your weapons by going underwater and it will remove the bloodstains of your weapons. And that is so damn great to see that attention of detail at the time when this game was released. The soundtrack of Shadow Warrior is pretty damn good. Composed by the legend himself, Lee Jackson, his soundtrack in Shadow Warrior is god levels of awesomeness, and rather than using MIDI soundtrack, it uses the audio tracks of the game's CD for music playback, resulting in higher quality for the soundtrack. And this allowed Lee Jackson to include a wide variety of instruments to fit the game's Asian theme. Here's some music of his work. For me, I really like the soundtrack of the game. It packs a lot of adrenaline to my ears, and it appears that Lee Jackson has really outdone himself once again. It's not just the music, but also the sound effects are damn good to hear. The weapon sounds are so satisfying to hear, especially the riot gun and the Uzis. Also, the explosion sounds are great to hear as well. And last but not least, we have the hero himself, Wang, who is voiced by John William Gold, who also did some voice acting on Daikatana, Prey, and Deus Ex. Just like Duke and Caleb, Wang makes a lot of pop culture references which pay homage to a lot of kung fu movies, hence why Shadow Warrior is a parody of kung fu movies. Here are some quotes.
You're no mess with Wang. How's that for kung fu fighting, you chicken shit? That's no ordinary Wang. That's no ordinary rabbit. A ninja knows no fear. Oh, split personality. Banzai! Ancient Chinese secret. Kawabunga. You are tiny grasshopper. It is good day to die. Better than acupuncture. Pain is for the weak. Oh, you faggot rabbit. You want to wash Wang? Or you want to watch Wang wash Wang? I am the Shadow Warrior. Hey, who flying this thing anyway? Dying times here. Holy cow, look like Duke Nukem.
He also says different quotes whenever you pick something different, as well as when you attack or kill enemies with a katana or fists, which adds a lot of variety, and I liked it. It adds a lot of personality.
Luck is with you, Wang. We'll meet again.
Hey, come back here and finish fight! Ogre, skelly, snake, shitface.
So, at the end of the day, Shadow Warrior is one hell of a banger and lives up to the greatness of the Build Engine Quartet. 3 Realms took what they've learned from Duke Nukem 3D and decided to make a Build Engine game that was even better than Duke Nukem 3D, and it clearly shows, from its gameplay, to its weapons, to the level design, and its graphics and soundtrack. Shadow Warrior managed to be even better than Duke Nukem 3D in every way possible. Good job 3D Realms, congratulations. Also, if you want to buy this game, it's actually free on both Steam and GOG, so what are you waiting for? Go out and download it now! This game is a must-have for FPS enthusiasts such as myself. Overall, Shadow Warrior is one heck of an outstanding game, and then some.
Who wants some Wang? Yes. I see you ready for action. I like that. Learn well, my son. It is natural to die. Mass destruction is my thing. Banzai! Hey, you. Yes, you. I am the Shadow Warrior. Let's fight. What are you waiting for? Eh? I'm talking to you. I am everybody's worst nightmare. Now, let's fight. Pathetic. You're not too smart. You too stupid to duck. You blocking with your head again. What's the matter, you scaredy cat? Hey, come back here and finish fight. You can't evade me forever. Chicken bonk, 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 bonk. Slap your teeth out. You're no mess with Wang. Yeah. Right on, state farm, outer state, get down, okay. Oh, I see big Wang. Nice.